It was supposed to be just another day. I had walked into my favorite little bookstore tucked away in a quiet corner of town, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. The smell of old pages and fresh coffee wrapped around me like a familiar coat. Life had been steady, predictable even, filled with tasks, to-do lists, and conversations that never seemed to go deeper than the surface. I wasn't looking for anything, let alone someone. But sometimes, life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. She walked in like a breath of fresh air, calm, unhurried, and carrying something I couldn't quite define. I didn't notice her at first. Not really. It was the way the barista paused mid-sentence to smile at her, or how her quiet thank you somehow lingered in the air. There was a softness to her presence, not loud or demanding, but noticeable in a way that made you wonder why everything else suddenly seemed dull in comparison. I was flipping through a book I'd probably never buy when I heard a voice beside me. "That one's overrated," she said casually, her tone light but certain. I looked up, caught off guard, and saw her looking at me. Not in a flirtatious way, not even overly friendly, just present, like she genuinely wanted to know what I'd say back. "You think so?" I replied, pretending to be surprised even though I'd only picked it up because the cover looked interesting. We laughed briefly, but it stayed with me. I didn't ask for her name, and she didn't offer it. But something about her remained as I walked out into the rainy street. I kept thinking about how easily she'd spoken to a stranger, like she'd been doing it her whole life. Over the next few days, her memory kept tugging at my thoughts. I didn't know her name, her story, or whether I'd even see her again. But something inside me hoped I would. There was a feeling I hadn't had in years. Something between anticipation and wonder. I tried brushing it off, convincing myself that maybe I'd imagined it all. The way she looked at me, the spark in our brief exchange. Then a week later, I saw her again. Same bookstore. This time, she was browsing the poetry section. I didn't mean to watch her, but something in me froze. Not out of fear, but disbelief. She looked up and smiled. "Back for another overrated one?" she teased. I walked over, this time more certain, less hesitant. We talked again. Longer. About poems and stories. About how bookstores had a magic that online shopping could never replicate. She spoke about her favorite lines like they were secret pieces of her soul. And I listened like I'd never heard anyone speak before. There was no grand moment, no thunderclap realization that this was it. But there was something steady, something real. I could feel the rhythm of something beginning, not loud or urgent, but quiet and deeply moving. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something more subtle, something that grew with each word she spoke. We sat on the little bench near the back of the shop. She talked about how some books feel like home, how the right story finds you at the right time. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. It was enough to be near her, to hear her speak, to feel the warmth in the space between us. As the light dimmed outside and the world slowed down, I realized I didn't want to leave. Not because I was afraid the moment would end, but because it felt like something had just begun. She came closer, not in distance, but in presence. And in that closeness, something inside me responded. A stirring, a whisper, a quiet truth I could no longer ignore. She came closer, and I couldn't stop myself from wanting to stay right there. I started noticing the smallest things after that. The way her name, Maya, sounded when someone else said it. The way she tilted her head slightly when she was thinking. The way her laugh never tried too hard to be pretty, but always was. We hadn't exchanged numbers or made any promises, but somehow, we kept running into each other. Some might call it coincidence. I didn't care what it was. All I knew was that it felt right. It started with random meetings. At the same cafe, a few seats apart. At the park, her sitting cross-legged on the grass with a sketch pad. At the grocery store, both of us reaching for the same jar of honey. Each time, the conversation picked up like we'd never stopped. There was no awkward small talk. Just realness. She told me about her love for old songs, the kind with scratches and static. I told her about the stories I wrote but never shared. Somehow, she made me want to share everything. The rhythm between us was effortless. She didn't ask questions to fill silence. She waited for answers that mattered. And I found myself telling her things I hadn't told anyone. Not because I was looking for sympathy, but because she listened like every word was worth hearing. One afternoon, she said something that stayed with me. "People don't scare me," she said, "but pretending does." I understood more than I let on. We began to make time, not just run into each other. She invited me to join her for a walk one evening, no pressure, just steps and words. The air smelled like rain, and I remember watching her hands as she spoke. Small movements, expressive, like her fingers were part of the story. We talked about things most people avoid: loss, fear, hope. Her father had passed a year ago. She spoke about him without breaking, but the ache in her voice was unmistakable. I didn't try to fix it. I just listened. I told her about a time I'd almost given up on writing. She didn't offer advice. She just looked at me with this quiet certainty and said, "Then don't." No fluff, no pep talk. Just belief. And somehow that was enough. She had this way of anchoring people without holding them down. We sat on a bench for what felt like hours, saying little, letting the world move around us. She leaned her head against my shoulder and I didn't move. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to remember the exact weight of that moment. Everything felt calm. Right. Like all the noise I usually carried had gone silent. After that, something shifted. We weren't just people who kept meeting. We were people who kept choosing to stay. She started reading my writing, gently, respectfully, never with judgment. And when she said, "This made me feel something," it meant more than any compliment I'd ever received. There was one night I remember clearly. We had stayed out too long, lost track of time. She was cold, so I gave her my jacket. She didn't say thank you. She just looked at me like I'd done something far greater than I actually had. And I couldn't stop myself from thinking that if she asked me to, I'd give her the moon and not think twice. We still hadn't said anything dramatic. No confessions. No declarations. But something unspoken sat between us like a quiet promise. And maybe that's what real connection feels like. Not loud, not rushed, but deep. Like two people discovering the same truth at the same time. She came closer, not physically, but emotionally. Layer by layer, wall by wall. And each time, I found myself letting go of the fear I didn't know I'd been holding. She made vulnerability feel like strength. She made silence feel like comfort. And I couldn't stop myself from leaning in, not just toward her, but toward the life that felt possible with her in it. Every moment with her felt like a page I didn't want to end. Every laugh, every look, every word. It all stitched together into something whole. And though we hadn't called it love, I knew. I felt it in the way I waited for her messages, even when I told myself I wouldn't. In the way my day felt incomplete without her voice somewhere in it. She came closer. And I couldn't stop myself from believing that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something real. Some things don't need to be defined to be understood. We never labeled what we had, but we both knew it mattered. The way she looked at me when I wasn't trying to be anything. The way I felt more like myself around her than I ever had alone. It wasn't about perfect days or romantic gestures. It was about presence. Real, quiet, constant presence. We started sharing everyday life. Not the polished parts. The early mornings when we were too tired to talk. The evenings when the world had worn us thin. She'd sit beside me with her tea while I typed away, and even in silence, I felt seen. I watched her laugh with her whole body. I watched her cry once, without saying a word. And I stayed. I didn't know what love was supposed to look like, but it looked a lot like this. There were small arguments. Not loud. Not cruel. Just two people with edges, trying not to cut each other. I'd shut down. She'd get quiet. But we always came back. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. She'd leave me notes when she knew I was overwhelmed. I'd show up at her door when she said she was fine, but I knew better. We learned to read each other like open books, not always knowing the ending, but never wanting to stop turning the pages. Once, I forgot something important. A plan we'd made. She didn't yell. She just said, "It hurt more that you didn't think it would matter." That stayed with me longer than any raised voice could have. It reminded me that love is fragile, even when it feels strong. I apologized, not with grand gestures, but by showing up better. She noticed. She always noticed. Her presence taught me how to pay attention. To the little things. The way she hummed when she was focused. The way she looked at people when they talked, like they were the only ones in the room. The way she never let pain make her bitter. She didn't need saving. She needed someone who wouldn't leave when it got quiet. There was one night, after a long week, where she rested her head on my chest and whispered, "Thank you for not running." I didn't say anything back. I just held her closer. Because that's what love looked like to me. Staying when you're tired, listening when it's hard, showing up without being asked. She didn't need flowers or poems. She needed consistency, honesty, presence. I began to write more. Not for anyone else. Just for her. Little pieces of truth folded into words. I'd leave them where she'd find them. On her mirror. In her bag. She never said much about them, but I'd catch her smiling when she thought I wasn't looking. That was enough. We weren't perfect. Far from it. But we were honest. And that made it feel like everything was exactly as it should be. The world still pulled at us. Stress, deadlines, doubts. But we built something quiet in the middle of the noise. Something steady. Something real. When she started pulling back one day, I felt it immediately. She didn't say she was scared, but I saw it. I asked if she wanted space. She nodded, unsure. And for a moment I panicked. But instead of begging her to stay, I told her what I knew to be true. "I'm not here because it's easy," I said. "I'm here because you're worth it." She didn't answer right away. But a few days later, she came back, not with apologies but with presence. And that was all I needed. Sometimes love isn't about chasing someone down. It's about being where they know they can return to. She came closer, slowly, but with more truth than ever. And I couldn't stop myself from letting her in, again and again. Every time she doubted, I reminded her. Every time I faltered, she steadied me. We became each other's pause button in a world that never stopped spinning. This wasn't a love built on drama or intensity. It was built on choosing each other, over and over. In the quiet. In the ordinary. In the hard moments. She came closer, and I couldn't stop myself from knowing. This was the kind of love I'd never walk away from. Time passed, and with it came changes neither of us planned, but we adapted. The early spark turned into something deeper. Something that didn't depend on butterflies or perfectly planned days. We didn't need constant excitement. We needed each other's presence. I stopped counting the days since we met. It felt like she had always been a part of my life, like I couldn't remember what it felt like before her voice, her touch, her quiet reassurance. We didn't talk about forever. We lived it in pieces. Morning coffees made side by side. The way we fell into sync without trying. A glance that said more than a sentence. There was a moment when I looked at her and realized I didn't need more proof. She didn't just love me, she understood me. Not the polished version. The messy, stubborn, sometimes silent me. And she chose that version every time. We grew, both individually and together. She chased dreams she once hesitated to name. I learned to believe in mine again. We didn't hold each other back. We pushed each other forward, not by force but by faith. She taught me that love doesn't mean standing still. It means growing in the same direction. Even when the path curves. We didn't always agree, but we never forgot to return. That was the difference. I used to think love was about big moments, the dramatic ones you see in stories. But the truth? It's in the small things. It's in her remembering how I take my coffee. It's in me knowing when she needs space before she asks. It's in the silence that doesn't feel empty. Real love, I learned, is a quiet presence that never wavers. There were still hard days. Stress. Tiredness. Moments when life felt heavier than it should. But we faced them side by side. I never had to question if she'd walk away. And I never gave her a reason to wonder if I would. We built a home not with walls, but with trust. Not with promises, but with actions. She never asked for perfection. She asked for truth. And I gave her that every day. One evening, I looked at her while she spoke about something simple, something everyday. I don't even remember the words. But I remember the feeling, peace, contentment, clarity. In that moment, I knew I didn't need anything more. She was it. Not because she completed me, but because she made me more of who I was always meant to be. She never needed grand declarations. But I still told her, often. Not just "I love you," But I'm with you. I see you. You matter. And she said them back in her own ways. A hand on my back when I couldn't sleep. A look that steadied me when doubt crept in. She didn't fix me. She didn't try to. She just stayed. That was enough. We didn't make a scene of milestones. No dramatic announcements. Just quiet progress. A shared life built one day at a time.